19th century Universalists, I learned in seminary, were preoccupied with history. They were on the outside looking in, socially speaking, and they wanted to be seen as credible by their peers. And one of the ways they sought to establish credibility was to trace their roots to the beginnings of Christianity, and even beyond those beginnings, back into the deeps of Egypt and Greece and beyond. Unquestionably ancient roots would make for legitimacy. So it is not out of universalist character to begin this sermon by invoking the ancient Greek Stoic philosopher Hierocles, who was famous in his day for describing personal identity in terms of a series of circles. The first one being one's own mind, and then next comes one's immediate family. And this is followed by extended family, and then the local community, and then the community of neighboring towns, then one's country, and it gets bigger and bigger, and then the human race. All of these circles or spheres of life, he said, make up who we are. And to the extent that we bring them into our living concern, the extent to which we think about them or we care for them, to that extent, we are rich. We are fulfilled. It's the hymn that we sang earlier in this service. Can I see another's woe and not be in my sorrow too? Can I see another's grief and not seek for kind relief? The only quibble we might have about Hierocles' picture of human identity is that he does not include the largest circle of all, the interdependent web of all existence and the plant and animal beings with which we share this planet. The woe of our earth is also something we must see, so it can be in our sorrow as well, and we will be led to seek kind relief for it. The universalism in our Unitarian Universalism wants this. It wants us to grow in conscience and in caring beyond egocentricity and towards service to increasingly larger spheres of life. Robert Cummins, one of the genius universalists of the 20th century, once said that a circumscribed universalism is unthinkable. This is universalism. You can't get small. You got to get big as you can get. Now today I want to talk about a very practical way of doing this. There is the vision of it, and then there's the nuts and bolts on the ground reality of it. So I want to talk about this, and it is called lifestyle activism. It is one response to the woe that we see in the larger circles of human identity. We will look at what it is, we're going to look at its challenges, and we're going to find some ways to get through those challenges. So lifestyle activism. Essentially, it is about spending money in conscious alignment to one's highest values. And it has been building since the 1950s. This congregation itself saw lifestyle activism in place. Some of you may still remember the story of Rich's department store and its racist practices in the 50s and 60s. And members of this congregation, they cut up their charge cards in protest. It was something they could do. It was a way of them saying, we're not going to spend our money at your place. And that leveraged power, that impacted Rich's department store. Since the 50s and 60s, people have been discovering how to leverage power in just this way. The bus boycotts, the lunch counter sit-ins in the civil rights movement, that was consumer power in action. Now, Fran Hawthorne, who tells a little bit of this story, she says that things somehow got a little bit off track in the 70s and 80s. This power seemed to be co-opted by materialism. It took the form of credit cards and frequent flyer clubs that shoppers could use to turn to first buy the item in hand, and then you could rack up points towards a trip or something like that. It was consumeristic. But things changed with the advent of the internet, because when you have the internet, you have all of this information in your hands, this information about corporate behavior, product ingredients, product availability, scientific warnings, investment returns, international conflicts, all of that widely available. It meant that mass actions were easier to organize. It meant that one could be a more intelligent consumer in the marketplace. For almost 70 years now, momentum has been building around this, and today we are in a time when consumer spending makes up almost 2/3 of Americans' economic activity. That is to the tune of $8 trillion annually. For that reason, lifestyle activism is poised to be a source of transformative change in any number of areas of life. And one of these areas is undoubtedly the environment, undoubtedly that, and I want to focus down on that. And as we do, right from the start, a question might come to mind for us, and that is because of the scale of environmental issues, because of the scale, it's so large, how are people's spending choices going to make any difference whatsoever, right? That's a question on our minds. I mean, the woe we see in nature takes the form of nothing less than climate change, dying species, wildfires, and how about extreme weather events? Now, supposedly one was supposed to happen here in Atlanta, right? This past Tuesday. Didn't happen. But you know what happened to Chicago? Temperatures as bad as you find in the Antarctic. And then do you know what is happening in Australia? Australia is burning. They've got temperatures going up to like 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, I was wrong, excuse me, 116 degrees Fahrenheit. Whoa! That is what we are facing. And what difference will personal small-scale actions have? Actions that reduce our individual carbon footprints. What's difference is that going to make? I mean, don't we really need top-down changes in the law and in business and in technology first? I mean, won't market-based solutions, eco-friendly legislation, developments in green technology, won't that make the biggest impact? And when that's accomplished, well, people will just fall in line and, we'll choose a vegetarian diet and we'll switch to compact fluorescent light bulbs, or, we'll take public transportation whenever we can. I mean, isn't that the time for us to kind of fall in line? Unless we clear this question up right from, some of you are going, I'm right with you. You're anticipating where I'm going. We need to get clear on this right from the start, because if we don't, environmental lifestyle activism is a non-starter. It's a non-starter. But the confusion does go away. The confusion does go away when we really see what lifestyle activism is about. Lifestyle activism is ultimately about integrity. It is about integrity. For us to wait for legislation or technology to solve the problem of how we are living our lives, says environmentalist Michael Pollan, this suggests something. It suggests we're not really serious about changing. And that is something our politicians will not fail to notice. They will notice that. They will not move until we do. And then Michael Pollan says, indeed, to look to leaders and experts, to laws and money and grand schemes to save us from our predicament, that represents precisely the sort of thinking, passive, delegated, dependent for solutions on specialists, that helped us get into this mess in the first place. When personal integrity is at stake, you just do what you're going to do. You don't have to wait for someone else to do something. You're just going to do what you're going to do. Don't worry about large-scale consequences. Same thing goes for when you are simply being clear about your values. You don't have to wait for other people to get clear about them. You don't have to wait for someone to define them for you. You define your values. There's real power to this sort of thing. We see the woe in our world, and we act out of integrity. We act out of our values. We don't have to wait for others to change. Of course we want laws and business and technology to change. Of course we do. But we don't have to wait for that to happen before we act. And this is empowering. Lifestyle activism is empowering. Universalism wants to put everybody on this path. But every rose has its thorn. I mean, what if when you see the woe, you feel completely overwhelmed by the complexity of the healing work involved? Fran Hawthorne explores this at length in her book entitled The Overloaded Liberal: Shopping, Investing, Parenting, and Other Daily Dilemmas in an Age of Political Activism. Does that title ring a bell with you? She starts out with some shtick that sounds a whole lot like Jeff Foxworthy. You might be an overloaded liberal if you hide the snack you brought to the playground for your 5-year-old, even though it's healthful and non-sugary, because, oh my gosh, you forgot you were supposed to boycott that particular food company. You might be an overloaded liberal if you drive 5 miles out of your way and pay 30% more to buy a screwdriver at the little independent hardware store just to avoid shopping at Walmart. You might be an overloaded liberal if you try to calculate your carbon emissions in driving that extra 5 miles versus the carbon footprint you would cause by turning on your computer to order the same screwdriver on Amazon. You might be an overloaded liberal if you stand in line for 10 minutes debating whether to buy imported organic blueberries or local non-organic. Some of you are looking at me going, what? I'm with you there too. That's pretty complicated, right? That's pretty complicated. You know, the hymn, as that hymn says, can I see another's grief and not seek for kind relief? Yes, but what if closing the gap between grief and relief is far more complicated than initially thought, right? And one reason has to do with information. Sometimes there is not enough information. It's going to the restaurant, you open up the menu, and the menu says nothing about which foods are local or organic or what farming methods were used. Eating at most restaurants poses exactly this kind of problem: not enough information to make a values-based decision. And then there's the opposite problem: too much information. Too many balls to juggle, even for experts like Michael Pollan. There is a book out there entitled 100 Everyday Ways You Can Contribute to a Healthier Planet. There is another book out there that says 250 Tips for an Eco-Friendly Lifestyle. And there's a third book out there that's entitled 1001 Ways to Save Planet Earth. Wait a second, says Fran Hawthorne. Am I supposed to do 100 things or 250 things or 1001 things for the environment? And you know what? There's a lot more stuff out there I love, issues that I stand up for. It can make a good Unitarian Universalist scream. Let's all just scream. Just one big 1, 2, 3. That was a very enthusiastic screaming, I gotta say. You know, an additional reason why lifestyle activism is challenging. You all made the baby cry, come on. Another reason why lifestyle activism is particularly challenging, and perhaps this is the more difficult reason, is that what is good for one identity circle, that baby was so good for most of the circle. Oh, I love it, I love it. But Taryn's right. You know, the sound of a baby crying, the sound of a baby in this room, that's the sound of a growing congregation. We need to love that. It's okay. Okay, so this is something that Hierocles might have overseen. The problem here is this, that what is good for one identity circle is not necessarily good for another identity circle. And again, I don't know if Hierocles ever really recognized this. He talked about mind and heart, right? And then immediate family, and then extended family, and then local community, and then extended community, then country, right? And then human race, and of course today we are adding interdependent web of all existence, right? All of these identity circles, they don't all necessarily agree on what the good thing to do is. Says Fran Hawthorne, among the issues we liberals juggle, the ingredients and the things we buy, the energy that was used to produce them, the companies that make them, the stores in which we buy them, the means by which we travel to those stores, the companies we invest in, the impact on the planet, the impact on animals, the impact on our bodies. We almost never think about the workers who manufacture, grow, fix, ship, and sell that stuff in our lives. Is Fran Hawthorne right? Do we see the woe of the earth, but neglect to see the woe of the laborers? Is this what classism looks like? For too many people, the fact that Whole Foods is viciously anti-union is less irritating than the fact that it is just so darn expensive. Why is that so? Walmart is setting up incredibly ambitious green goals, making this a selling point to the public, even as it continues to be faced with major lawsuits alleging sex discrimination, together with illegally denying workers their mandatory breaks, forcing them to work without pay. Somehow, going green is seen as a more decisive selling point than going pro-labor. What is that all about? The path of lifestyle activism is a complicated and challenging path at times. At times, to heal one kind of woe is to create another kind of woe elsewhere. The healing work is complex like this, and also in other ways. We want justice to roll down, but let's look at the details of it. And this is exactly the time at which we experience one of the biggest tensions between the two different sides of our one Unitarian Universalist faith. The Unitarian side, particularly the 19th century, it used to have this slogan: salvation by character. Salvation was something you earned by good works, including going to all the right schools, reading all the right books, making all the right friends, shopping at all the right stores. The assumption was that you had sufficient control over your world, so that despite the worst that life threw at you, you could make things work. You were ultimately in charge. It is a theology of the wealthy and the lucky and the privileged. And when Universalism's finest preacher, Hosea Ballou, caught wind of this Unitarian slogan and this Unitarian theology, he immediately wrote an article, because that's what we preachers do. Or if he's not preaching, he immediately wrote this article entitled "Salvation Irrespective of Character." And he proclaimed how salvation was not something anyone could earn by works in an uncertain, challenging, often unlucky, and way too complex world. Only a gracious God could secure our salvation and secure our inherent worth and dignity. And it did not matter what kinds of books a person wrote, or where they went to school, or where they did their shopping. You try to do your best in life anyhow, said Ballou. Not because you're aiming to escape hell, not because you're aiming to earn your right to deserve love here or in the hereafter, but because God, and today we might say nature, because God plants a natural impulse in us. That natural impulse tells us to reach out, to try to succeed as best as we know how, to do the best we can as we understand it at the time. That is a natural impulse in us, and we just do that. And when we do that, we feel joy. It's just a natural thing. The Universalist says there is no question that human beings want to try and in every moment to do the best they can as they envision it. There is no question about that. So let your joy lead you. Just let your joy lead you. From all of this, what we can see is that when you are facing the complexities of doing good work, of doing justice work, and it blows your mind and it paralyzes you, well, what's happening is you are coming from the Unitarian inside you. Because it is the Unitarian inside us that is deep in a sense of privilege and feels like it's got to have everything in its control. And when something is out of our control and is way more complicated than we can control, we freak out. That is the Unitarian in us. At times like this, as we are praying and singing for justice to roll down, if we do not cling to universalism, we're going to crash. It is only in universalism's modesty that we are going to find the resilience to continue showing up to the work of seeking relief for the woes that we see. Only universalism gives us the ears to really hear these great words from the Talmud. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justice now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. So what if the work is tough? So what? All we can do is show up, pay attention, do what you can to the best that you know, and then let it go. So let's do that.